Charlie Gatehouse is one of the most important figures in the history of Shakespeare Cliff. Where Samphire Hoe is now, Charlie Gatehouse used to live and work. He lived in a hut on the foreshore beneath the cliffs, and he worked on digging the first Channel Tunnel in 1881. And then when he stopped work in 1886, he kept on digging, this time mining for coal, until the mines closed in 1915. He said that the shifts were long, and the pay was bad, and the work was back-breaking. He said the biggest problem with the mines was the flooding. He said the best thing was the old miners, when they used to talk about their days in other places and other mines, and he used to listen to them, those old men with lined faces, smeared with coal dust, and one day they told him about the knockers. "Come here, Charlie, come here. Let me tell you something. Have you heard of the knockers?" He shook his head. "The knockers, I'll tell you, boy, they're little people. They're no bigger than the size of your hand. And they work down these mines, they work down all mines, just like we do. But they're on the other side of the coalface. That's right. You don't believe me? Well, then just go down the mine on your own sometime and listen, and if you're lucky, boy, you'll hear those knockers knocking. Oh, and there's one other thing. If you ever do hear or see the knockers, if they see you, you better watch out. Because if they like you, they'll help you. But if they don't like you, boy, well, they'll do you harm." One evening, young Charlie Gatehouse came off his shift and stood at the head of the mine. The others had already washed up, headed off towards the shacks under the cliff where they were going to eat, drink, sleep, wait till the next shift. But Charlie Gatehouse lingered behind. There was a winch and a platform that let the miners down, but Charlie was on his own. So instead of the winch, he had to use the ladder. A long iron ladder that went all the way down to the bottom. Charlie checked his pockets in the darkness. He had a candle, good, and a match, that's good. He pulled his cap onto his head, buttoned up his jacket and started to climb down. As he climbed, it got darker, and the darkness grew thicker and thicker around him till he couldn't see anything. But he kept on going, reaching out one by one for the next rung of the ladder down. It was cold, he was shivering, and he was deep down now, deep down. His hands were sticking with cold to the rails of the ladder, and he was reaching out for the next step, reaching out, but there wasn't a next step. This was it. He'd come to the bottom. He held on to the ladder, though, wrapped his arms around it, reached inside his pocket, pulled out the candle. His hands were shaking, managed to light it, managed to shed a little light, a little circle of light, and he held up that candle and he listened. He listened. And then he heard it. Tapping. The faintest sound of tapping, as though tiny little pickaxes were knocking from the other side of the coalface. Charlie listened, straining his ears for the sound. They were knocking, and he lifted his candle up higher, and he said into the darkness, "Hello?" And then he saw a face. Yes, it was a face. A tiny face, lined and smeared with coal dust, with a cap squinting at him, and then next to another one. And then he could see both of them, They were no bigger than the size of his own hand. They had pickaxes over their shoulders, and they were looking up at him, and there was a third one now. And Charlie said again, "Hello." And then his candle flickered and went out. And the knocking stopped. There was complete silence and stillness, and in that silence, Charlie heard another sound. The sound of water. It started as a whisper, and then a hiss, and then he could hear it clearly. Yes, it was water. It was rushing from down below somewhere, and Charlie turned. And now he was scrambling back up the ladder, and now his feet were slipping. He was going too fast, and he could hear down below him. It was water, it was gushing in the darkness. It must have broken through somewhere. There must have been a crack somewhere down below, and it was coming fast, and Charlie could hear it, and he was climbing now, desperate now, feeling the spitting, damp wetness rising up from below. He could smell it, the water, the salt smell of the sea water. He felt it round his feet. It was rising faster than he could climb, and he was climbing as fast as he could now, but the water was at his ankles. The rising water, now it was at his knees. It was cold, it was clinging, and he looked up, desperate. The sight of the top of the mine, surely it was there, surely he could see it, and he was shouting now. His mouth was dry, but he was shouting, "Help! Help!" But who would hear? Only if the next shift, only if it was getting ready now, who would know? The water was up to his waist. He was gripping and pulling, but each time he slipped. He was slipping down into the water, but he must keep going. "Help! Help!" And then he heard a voice. "Who's down there?" "It's Charlie, it's me. It's flooding down here. What are you doing down there, lad? For God's sake, get the winch going, lads. Help!" The water was up to his shoulders, and he was shaking with the cold now. He couldn't go any further. He stopped. He heard the sound of the chain up above rattling. They were winching down the platform. "Charlie, you've got to jump. It's coming down. Jump onto it, lads." But he couldn't move any more. The water was up there now to his neck, up to his mouth, up to his eyes. He was frozen there, gripping on with his hands, with his feet, slipping, still trying to keep his balance, and the water was in his mouth, his nose, his ears, gripping and pulling him down. Now it was over his head. There was only the sound of the rushing of the water. And he heard something splash above him, looked up, but he was choking now, he was coughing now. He could see the platform, the dark shape of the platform, but he couldn't move. He couldn't move. And then he felt something push him. A great push that heaved him up, shot him above the water, sent him flopping, gasping onto the platform. He's on, pull it up, lads, come on, pull. And Charlie lay there gasping and choking as they pulled him up, above the waters, to safety. Anxious faces met him at the top. They dragged him off the platform. "What were you doing down there, lad?" He was coughing out water. They whacked him on the back. "Come on, lad, you'll be all right." He coughed and choked, gasped. But he was safe. And he stammered out, "It's flooding down there. It's flooding down there. You've done well, lads. You've done well. Good on you, Charlie. How did you find that out? Why did you go down there, Charlie? Well done, Charlie, lad. Well done, Charlie, lad." Charlie, sopping wet, stood there, watching the men busy with the winch and the pumping gear. One of the old miners stopped and took Charlie aside. "You went down to look, didn't you, Charlie? You went down to look for them." "That's what I did." "You saw them?" "I saw them, all right. I saw them clear as I'm seeing you. Just as you said they were. Just like you said. Just like us. Small. With pickaxes. Just like us." The old miner's face creased into a grimy smile. "Gave you a fright, did they, Charlie lad? Didn't like you spying on them, probably. But they saved me. They saved me. They gave me a push, they did." The miner nodded grimly. Aye. They like to play their tricks, those knockers, they like. Well, you're still here, aren't you? So they must have took a liking to you. That's what I'd say. Must have took a liking to you, probably. The old miner nodded quickly and went to join the others and left Charlie standing there, thinking to himself, yes, I saw the knockers, and they must have took a liking to me. That's what it was. That's what it was.